I want you to imagine your inner world like a blackout curtain. At first, you can't really see what's in front of you, like it's completely dark. And you can't really tell what's real, what's not, because everything seems a little foggy, a little heavy, and very confusing. Now, I want you to imagine pulling that curtain back a little bit. And behind it, there's another curtain, right? But it's not a blackout curtain, it's one of those sheer curtains. Light starts to come in and shapes begin to form, and you're not fully seeing the light yet, but you're no longer completely in the dark. That is what happens when you begin to dig deeper into yourself. Today, I want to talk about that process and what really starts to happen when you stop living in the dark and you start to peel back the layers of who you really are. And I don't just mean the beautiful and spiritual and positive parts, but digging into the shadows, the truths, the clarity, the freedom. And this won't only change your mindset, but it will completely transform your life in a positive way. If you're new here, I'm Sarah, and I created this channel to give you everyday practical ways to bring more love and peace and joy and happiness and abundance and all the good things into your life through self-mastery and spirituality. And before we keep going, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can hang out again next week. So let's dig into a little bit of an uncomfortable truth here. Most people, I think it's something like 85% of people, never dig into themselves. Not really because they're incapable of it, we're all capable of it, but more so because we are distracted and we're unwilling. Most people stay busy and entertained and reactive. They stay focused on the outside world because the inside world feels unknown and it feels scary. But when you slow down and you turn inward, you no longer are running from yourself. And a lot of times that's where a lot of the resistance can really start, because digging deeper means asking questions that you've most likely avoided your entire life. It's feeling emotions that you have numbed, and also seeing patterns within yourself that you don't want to admit that are there. So instead, people fill their space, their mental load, their life with phones and work and relationships and drama and social media and TV, and overall a constant stimulation. Silence has a very interesting way of revealing truth, and truth requires courage. Digging into yourself, I have the belief, is the most courageous thing that a person can really do. And here's the thing, when you first start digging deeper into yourself, it is not peaceful. It is very uncomfortable, and it is kind of like the blackout curtain phase of everything. You start to really notice things that maybe you didn't before, and a lot of times your thoughts become a lot louder. Your emotions can also like swing back and forth a lot more than you would have expected, and you realize that your reaction to different things aren't as random as you previously thought. And what you begin to see as these things get louder is how much of you operates on autopilot, and you start realizing that you've been living on default mode, and that you've been avoiding yourself, and that you've been reacting and not making active choices. And this phase can be very destabilizing. It can be really frightening because it's like a lot, and it'll start to hit you a lot. And that's because when you start to become aware of these things, it removes that illusion that you have created for yourself most likely your entire life. And the thing is once you see some of these things, you can't go back to unseeing it or not knowing it. And because of this, most people will stop once they get to this, to go back to comfortability and normalcy and just again running from themselves again. But from my own experience, I will tell you, this is when you really start to gain your power back. If you can push through the darkness and push through the uncomfortable truths and push through the false illusions that you've kept your entire life, this is the beginning of, what's the word? I want to say freedom. It's not the word I'm thinking of, but it's the beginning of liberation, right? So once you get past this like blackout curtain phase, you're now looking at the sheer one, right? Like the light is starting to come in, you're starting to see things, and you're starting to see yourself more clearly and more in your truth. And yes, it is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. And this is kind of where you have to get just unapologetically honest with yourself and put your pride or your ego or whatever aside and realize that you're doing this for you and that this is necessary to get to that other side. And this is where you'll start having these like realizations, such as a big one is like keeping people around or staying busy so that you don't have to like deal with your own thoughts and emotions, or that you stay busy to avoid feeling certain things, or that a lot of your own pain is self-created. And what happens in this stage, at least with me, is that I was very humbled. You know, it really shows you and shines a light on the victim mentality that the majority of us don't even realize that we're playing in our lives. And it'll start to dismantle your ego and the stories that you've been telling yourself about why things are the way that they are. This honesty isn't to punish yourself or be mean to yourself, it's to expose yourself, because you can't change what you are unwilling and refuse to look at. So I want to go through some of these truths that will probably surface when you start to do this. And really the biggest one for me that was like the most life-changing is that like you're more responsible for everything than you thought. And you start realizing how many choices you've had even when you told yourself you didn't have the choice. And you can start to see when you've stayed in relationships or jobs or situations for too long, or when you've avoided tough conversations or ignored your intuition or settled for comfort instead of alignment. And while it can sting and be really eye-opening, taking that responsibility is the path to the liberation, to the freedom, to actually building a better life for yourself, which is what my entire channel is about. Because once you own that power, positive and negative, that is where everything changes. Another thing is that not everything that hurt you was meant to break you. You know, if you think about some of the hardships that you've faced, you'll realize that a lot of these experiences have shaped you and given you really positive qualities, such as listening to your intuition or being resilient or learning to have tough conversations or learning what to avoid. A lot of situations will force you to grow even when you felt like you weren't ready. And so you'll kind of stop seeing yourself as unlucky or falling behind, and you'll start seeing how every experience that you've had has sculpted you, has shaped you to be who you are. And this is where transmutation comes in, where your pain becomes information and challenges become teachers. And that's kind of when the puzzle pieces start to come together, and your story will start to make a little more sense for you. The next one is something that I'm still unpacking and working through, but it's a really important one, and that is that you've most likely been carrying a lot of things that aren't yours, including, you know, other people's expectations or family conditioning or timelines of like society, like, oh, maybe you have to have this much money by this age or be married by this age, or, you know, whatever. And you start asking yourself, well, if I didn't live by those outside things, how would I choose differently? What do I want to choose for myself? Now, when you're doing this emotional work, a lot of emotions are going to surface. It can look like really intense fatigue. That's one I feel often, because you're like going through all of this, like think about how much like mental energy you're using. You can have a lot of irritation or anger, whether it's at other people or yourself for making the decisions that you did. But I will say, one of the things that I say to myself to alleviate that a little bit is that version of me was doing the best that she could at the time with the knowledge that she had, right? So you don't want to hold today's version of you like to the same standard as, you know, 10 years ago, right? You know, and another big aspect of this is like, at least for me, like needing a lot of alone time to kind of like process everything and think about it and journal and things like that, and like getting all those thoughts out. And if you want to kind of start journaling, I'll post this video here for you so you can kind of get a little bit of guidance on starting that journey. And this is kind of allowing you to reset your nervous system and kind of like clean it out. And at least in my experience, that solitude was the most important thing that I had and that I did. And the thing about solitude is like, it's not isolating yourself, which I did do. It's not withdrawing, it's intentional time alone. Because when you're always around other people or getting stimulated by your phone or whatever it is, your attention and your energy is outward. And so when you're alone, you're forcing that energy to go inward. And that's when you start to hear your own voice, right? Instead of all these other people's. And I'll tell you, as someone who used to be that person who could never be alone, always had to be around other people, it stops feeling lonely when you start to understand yourself more. And now I crave that solitude and alone time to process and to come back into myself, right? And it went from something that I avoided my entire life to something that I need and that is necessary for me to be fully who I am. And once you get to this point, that's where you can fully pull back that sheer curtain and see the full picture, all the clarity, all the light. And this is when you start experiencing an inner calm that isn't dependent on outside people or circumstances. This is when boundaries start to feel a little more natural, and that's when decisions become a little more aligned, and it kind of slows down that overthinking. You start to trust your timing, you start to trust your intuition, you start to trust yourself. And if you want to play some games to learn how to practice your intuition, I'll post this video here as well. And finally, outside of yourself, when you start to dig deeper, it will not only change your life within yourself, but it will change the relationships that you have with everyone around you. And what will happen is you'll stop chasing validation, you'll stop over-explaining, you'll stop craving to be understood by people who either don't or are unable to understand you. And this doesn't make you colder, it just makes you more intentional and more clear. And that's when you begin to love more intentionally and choose more consciously. And the right people will meet you at this depth, right? Or, you know, they will fall away, and that can be a hard part of this process. You know, a big thing I really experienced at this stage is becoming less reactive. I didn't realize how reactive I was. But what happens is when something happens or someone says something or whatever it is, instead of just going immediately unconsciously reacting to something, you'll pause. You create space between whatever this is and your reaction. And that pause is where your power lies. And then at some point you'll realize you're not who you thought you were. And it's usually not in a bad way. It's really, this is where things become expansive. And if you want to learn a little bit more of self-identity, I'll post this video here for you to check out. I hope you guys found value in this video. If you want some exercises on how to dig deeper, let me know in the comments and I can definitely make a video on that. I love you guys so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can hang out again next week. And don't forget, be limitlessly yourself.